As Angela said, my name is Nathan Foster, and I'm a senior planner with our Tulsa planning office. I actually work in the current planning division, so I deal most directly with the Planning Commission, the Board of Adjustment, and the zoning code. I was telling her before the meeting that you guys are a seriously fortunate neighborhood. You have so many great destinations around here. You have your own neighborhood brewery, which I find to be an amazing thing. And you also just have a lot of options as far as where you go. But finally, you have a very organized and dedicated staff of leaders here who've got you guys all meeting together and advocating for the right things. And so that kind of leads to where we got involved and what we've been approached about, which is the possibility of an overlay zoning tool and how that might be able to help protect or preserve some of the character pieces of your neighborhood that you guys find to be very important and that define the neighborhood that you have. I know we've heard mentions of the unique architecture that's here, just as well as the charm and the overall character of the neighborhood. So zoning in general, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, is what controls the use and the building placement and the things on your property. It's the rules that we live by when we live in a city. And so back in 2016 now, we adopted a new set of zoning ordinances for the city of Tulsa. It was way overdue. The zoning code at the time was from 1970, and it had lived on until 2016. And so with that update came a lot of new opportunities and new tools that we could present that could be utilized by neighborhoods, it could be utilized by commercial districts, and things that would help to essentially preserve neighborhoods without the full heavy hand of like a historic preservation district. And the tool that was devised was called an overlay. And an HP district, as you all probably heard of, like Swan Lake, for example, is an overlay zoning, but it has a very particular set of rules and process by which those houses are controlled in terms of their historic significance and the resources that they have that contribute to that historic significance. There's only a few of those neighborhoods in town, and so there were other neighborhoods that weren't necessarily interested in going a full-fledged historic preservation, but they did have unique elements about their neighborhood that they wanted to protect. Some of it was just about the height of houses that were being constructed in the neighborhood, or a setback that was more common in the neighborhood that they wanted to see new development kind of match or protect. And so this overlay tool was come up with really out of that effort to say there are unique circumstances, there are unique neighborhoods that require maybe a lighter touch, but that do still have some elements that are worth looking at and worth potentially protecting. So a while back now, Casey and Tom, I think, were the initial ones that approached our office to discuss with us the possibility of a neighborhood overlay, which is just a residential overlay. And this has not been done since we adopted these new rules. We've used the overlay tool in a few different contexts, but they were not residential. So one example would be the river design overlay. There is a corridor along the Arkansas River that has additional zoning restrictions and requirements for anyone developing multifamily or commercial type structures that helps to create a design that complements the trail and the river and the asset that the city has in that area. And that's kind of the neat thing about this tool, is that it's so versatile. It can be very prescriptive, it can be very light. So a light example would be along Route 66, and some of you may have attended meetings about this and heard me speak about it when it was being proposed originally, but we adopted a zoning overlay for the entire length of Route 66 in Tulsa to allow for neon signage. That was something previously the zoning code was always a challenge to. And so we just got to go in with that one and literally just pull out a few things that were different about Route 66, and in a few paragraphs set up a way that business owners would then be able to do neon, where otherwise in the city you're not allowed to do that. So taking that tool in that context and now taking it into a neighborhood scenario is something very new. And it's something that we've now talked with your city councilor about, and we've had meetings about the discussions of what this might look like and what a tool might need to include based on the neighborhood's desires and the wants that people have as far as protecting those properties that they have. So in initial discussions with the councilor, she was very interested in this idea, but she was also interested in trying to come up with something from this idea that could be mimicked. So if Renaissance liked it, then maybe there's other neighborhoods that would like to have something that would also create a scale or a form for their neighborhood that they could adapt and then adopt for themselves. So the steps by which we kind of create these overlays is it's very much a publicly engaged process. All property owners are aware of what's going on. There's many, many meetings discussing what are the things being proposed within that overlay. And there's a lot of opportunity to get feedback about what are the important things we want to include and what are those things that we would like to leave out of it. So the first step is we write the standards. So we're going to come up with what are these additional rules that we would like to apply to some of these neighborhoods, and then we adopt those directly into the city's zoning code. So if you go look now, there's an overlay chapter of the city's zoning code where these will be listed, and then you can reference what are those additional standards or those requirements that you have to adhere to if you find yourself in one of those areas. So that's the first step, is we're going to begin drafting some of these. The counselor, if I understand correctly, intends to initiate this process, and that's kind of our driving factor. We wait for an initiation from a city councilor or from the planning commission to take off and work on something like this. And so last we talked with her, it was her intent to move forward with the initiation of starting to draft some of those standards. And that's where you all would expect to be very involved. So we will start to have public meetings where we lay out some drafts, we talk about some concepts. We also just listen to you all so you can tell us, what are the things that concern you? What about new development becomes a risk for you or something that you feel might threaten the neighborhood and the existing character and charm you guys already have? And then we go through a very iterative process of drafting that, presenting it to the neighbors, coming back, drafting more, removing, subtracting, doing whatever we need to do to get to a place where there's a consensus around that idea. And then the next step is very much just a rezoning. So once we have the standards in place, what will happen is there will need to be an initiation of a zoning change for the properties that are to be included in that overlay. So that's another whole process where, again, we're going to be really engaged with the neighborhood. The property owners that are involved will be included as well, and there will be very much a constant contact between the city of Tulsa and any neighbor that's involved. But I do think that it's a tool that you guys can be very excited about, and it's something that if you're very proud of the way your neighborhood looks, and I know that there's concerns citywide about infill development and how it impacts the neighborhood. And there's definitely examples you can find around town where new builds are very much out of scale with the historic homes that are in the neighborhood. And that, to me, is kind of the driving effort here, is a thought about trying to make sure that as new development occurs within your neighborhood, it's not something that's going to be injurious or somehow harmful to the neighboring properties or to the neighborhood. And so that is kind of what you guys can expect to happen next. Is I believe that once this is initiated by the counselor, we will begin scheduling those public meetings. It is very much in a preliminary stage right now. We've got some very good drafts and examples that actually Tom and Casey were nice enough to help do some research and provide us with some other cities that had similar ordinances. So we're going to look at that. We're going to base what we do off of that, and hopefully by the time we come up with something, we can get back to you guys and find a way to explain it and put it into words that even those of you that are not attending tonight and some other neighbors in the neighborhood who aren't as sure about this will be able to be open to that idea. And so what I've done is brought just a stack of business cards, because we don't have a lot of material on this yet. It's just very preliminary. But I do want you guys to feel free as this progresses to always be in contact with myself and our office. That's what we're there for. We're going to explain the process, and we're going to lay out everything that we're proposing. But I do think that there's a lot of benefits to something like this being applied to a neighborhood where the residents themselves find a lot of value in the character that the neighborhood has, and they want to protect that value. And so what we are going to hope to do is find a way with the residents of the neighborhood to establish something that everybody can get behind. And I know that really is the counselor's drive as well, and she wants to open that dialogue. She wants to talk about what some of those parameters might be, and then she wants to just kind of talk about what those challenges might be as we go through the process. So